In the year 334 BC, a young king would change the world. Before him stood the greatest superpower of its time, Persia. Only 20 years old, but destined to be remembered for eternity. He came from a land where warriors and philosophers shaped history. Athens in spiral mines, Sparta forged steel. Across the Aegean, an empire of unimaginable wealth awaited. A century earlier, 300 Spartans had defied the might of Persia.
At Salamis, the Greek fleet struck back. And with fire and steel, they forced Persia to retreat.
But unity gave way to rivalry, and Greece turned on itself.
To the north, a forgotten kingdom was awakening.
Philip of Macedon dreamed of a united Greece and a war against Persia.
His weapon of revolution, the deadly sarissa. A wall of iron, moving as one.
At Cheronea, the old powers fell before Macedon.
Greece was united under Macedonian command. But Philip's dream died with a blade in the dark.
In his place rose a legend. Those who defied him were broken. Thebes was erased as a warning to all Greece.
With Greece at his back, he marched toward destiny.
This was the beginning of Alexander the Great.
This is Greece, a land where stone spoke of gods and men.
Here, ideas clashed with steel and shaped the world.
Athens, where democracy, drama, and reason were born.
Sparta, where discipline forged warriors like iron.
But across the sea, a storm was coming.
The Persian Empire stretched farther than any before it. And at its head stood a king who commanded nations.
Empires rose and fell, but Persia grew ever larger. In 480 BC, the Persians crossed the sea.
But Greece would not bow without a fight. "300 Spartans stood against an empire. For 3 days, they held the line.
But betrayal opened the gate.
"300 men fell, but not in vain."
The sea would become their next battleground. Greece gathered its strength upon the water.
The narrow straits turned Persia's numbers against them.
Fire consumed their fleet. Their invasion faltered, and they turned home. Greece had withstood the storm. From war's ashes rose a golden age.
Temples rose to honor gods and glory.
Great minds questioned everything.
Options. They sought beauty and knowledge.
Here, voices rose to shape their world. But unity faded as rivalries returned.
Brother turned against brother.
Greece bled for decades. Year after year, the land burned. And Greece grew weak.
From the north, eyes were watching.
Philip saw what others did not. Greece was tired of war. But a new power was rising. The tide began to turn. But Persia still ruled half the world. And the world stood at the edge of a new age.
Far to the north, a rugged land awaited its destiny. To the Greeks, it was a backwater, unworthy of notice. But under one man, everything would change. Philip dreamed of uniting Greece under his banner.
His first weapon, discipline.
A spear twice as long as any Greek had ever faced.
An unbreakable wall of iron. And above all, his shock weapon Essing, the companion cavalry.
He forged power from a forgotten land.
Then he marched on his neighbors.
At Chaeronea, the old order shattered.
Greece was united under one banner.
The League of Corinth bound the Greek world together. Philip became hegemon of Greece.
His eyes turned to Persia. An army ready to march across the world. A grand vision was set in motion. But in the shadows, envy stirred. A blade was being readied.
Philip fell to an assassin's hand.
His son would inherit it all. At 20, he became king. A lion awakened. But rebellion rose to challenge him. Alexander crushed his foes swiftly.
Illyria and Thessaly fell in turn.
Thebes was erased from the map. All of Greece bowed to him. And he inherited his father's dream.
An army gathered on the shore.
He left his homeland behind.
And crossed into destiny.
Now the world would know his name.
Destiny marched with him.
His enemy was the greatest empire on earth.
Ahead lay glory or death.
And so the story began.
In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander crossed into Asia. The Persian satraps gathered their strength to meet the invader.
Memnon urged them to burn the land and starve the invader.
But the satraps refused. They would fight him at the river.
The Persians waited at the Granicus.
Alexander came with 13,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry.
The Macedonian phalanx, an iron wall, moved forward. Cavalry on both flanks, ready to strike like lightning.
Alexander led the charge himself.
They stormed the Granicus under a hail of Persian arrows.
The Persians unleashed a storm of arrows.
The Macedonians raised their shields against the hail.
Then steel met steel in the water.
Alexander rode into the thick of the fight.
The Persian line began to falter.
The phalanx pressed forward, relentless.
Two Persian nobles rode to face him.
A sword struck his helmet. The blow could have ended everything.
But Alexander struck him down.
Cleitus struck down the man who would have slain his king.
The companion cavalry smashed through their flank. The Persian cavalry broke and fled.
The Greek mercenaries stood alone.
Alexander showed no mercy.
The mercenaries were slaughtered where they stood.
Alexander had won his first great victory.
The Granicus ran red that day. Asia Minor now lay at his mercy.
Sardis surrendered without a fight.
This was the first step to empire. Victory echoed across the plains. But the dead lay silent beneath the sky. The young king looked east. The Persian banner fell.
The road to empire stretched before him.
The legend was growing. The Battle of the Granicus was won.
Alexander's army marched into Cilicia, toward Issus.
Darius, king of kings, brought an army twice the size of Alexander's. The plain was narrow, perfect for the outnumbered Macedonians. 10,000 immortals stood in the center, unshaken. Alexander saw the narrow plain and smiled.
The Macedonian phalanx locked into place like iron. Darius commanded 100,000 men.
He placed himself on the right wing, where the battle would be decided. He sent his best horsemen to Parmenion on the left.
Two worlds waited in silence. The Persian archers opened the battle. The phalanx lifted its shields to the storm.
Alexander shifted his cavalry to strick the Persian left. They stormed the river against a hail of arrows. Steel met steel in the water. Alexander led the charge. On the left, Parmenion held the line. Darius watched from his golden chariot. The immortals struck the center like a hammer. Alexander's spear pointed toward the great king himself.
The Persian left collapsed under the weight of the charge.
The Macedonian phalanx drove into the Persian center.
And the great king began to waver.
Darius fled the field. His army followed in panic. Alexander drove hard after the fleeing king.
The Pinaris ran red with Persian blood.
His camp yielded unimaginable treasure.
Even the royal family fell into his hands.
But the King of Kings had escaped.
The fields of Issus lay silent beneath the stars.
Thousands lay where they fell.
Alexander had defeated the King of Kings. The Persian standard was his prize. The road to the east lay open.
His name carried on the wind.
The Battle of Issus was won.
After Issus, Alexander turned south toward Tyre.
Tyre, an island fortress, proud and defiant. The Tyrians rejected his demand to enter their city. Tyre's walls rose 150 feet above the sea. Alexander began to plan an assault unlike any other.
He ordered a massive causeway built across the sea.
The Tyrians struck back with fire.
Flames consumed the first causeway. But Alexander would not give up. The siege of Tyre had truly begun. Allied fleets arrived to seal the island's fate. A blockade closed in from every side.
Towering siege engines rose over the water. The defenders braced themselves for the storm. Arrows darkened the sky. The great towers advanced toward Tyre.
The Tyrians rained fire on the causeway. The causeway burned beneath their feet.
Then came the Macedonian fleet. The great walls of Tyre began to tremble.
The wall began to give way.
The sea wall of Tyre was breached.
Alexander's men poured into the city.
They swept through the ruined walls into Tyre's streets.
Fighting raged through the heart of the city. The gates of Tyre fell to Alexander's men.
Tyre's streets ran with the fury of conquest.
Even the sacred temple could not stand.
At last, the citadel was theirs. Tyre burned beneath Alexander's gaze. By dawn, the city was silent. Thousands were taken as prisoners. Alexander stood victorious. His banner flew over Tyre. Tyre had fought with unmatched defiance. But Alexander's gaze now turned to Egypt.
The island fortress had fallen.
Alexander marched east toward the King of Kings.
Darius chose the plain of Gaugamela to crush the invader.
Darius assembled the greatest army the world had ever seen. Facing them, Alexander and his veterans. Darius, King of Kings, awaited him.
Alexander prepared a plan to outflank the Persians.
On the eve of Gaugamela, silence ruled the camp. The Persians waited with their endless host. Dawn broke over the field of Gaugamela.
Two worlds stood face to face.
The Persians moved to crush the Macedonian line. Deadly chariots thundered toward the Greek lines.
Alexander extended his right, drawing the Persians away from their center.
The chariots were swallowed and broken by discipline.
The Macedonian phalanx held fast. The Persian cavalry surged forward. On the left, Parmenians struggled to hold.
A fatal gap opened in the Persian center.
Alexander saw his moment and struck like lightning. The Persian center buckled under the impact.
Darius saw his army falter before his eyes.
Even his immortals could not save him.
The King of Kings fled the field.
With their king gone, the Persian army collapsed. Alexander drove into the heart of the Persian army.
On the left, Parmenion held against the storm.
The Persian army broke and fled. Alexander unleashed the pursuit.
The field of Gaugamela belonged to Alexander. In flight, Darius lost an empire. Alexander seized the royal camp. The wealth of Persia lay before him. Alexander stood triumphant over an empire. His banner flew where the King of Kings once ruled.
But the price of glory was written on the field.
And so he turned toward Babylon.
At Gaugamela, Alexander shattered an empire. Alexander marched toward the heart of Persia. Persepolis, the city of kings, lay ahead. The gates of an empire stood before him. No army met him at the gates. Alexander entered the heart of Persia. The throne of the King of Kings lay empty. And the Macedonians sat where empires were born. Here lay the wealth of a fallen world. The conquerors feasted in the House of Kings. And in the night, celebration turned to fire. In the drunken night, whispers turned to fury. A voice rose, calling for fire. One torch would ignite an empire. The spark became a storm. Alexander watched as fire consumed a kingdom. The night carried fire through the city of kings. The palaces of Persia burned. Persepolis burned like a star in the night. While the city burned, they plundered its heart. heart of Persia fell to ash. By dawn, Persepolis was smoke and ruin. The house of the King of Kings lay in ruin. The throne of Persia, now a memory. Alexander stood over the ashes of an empire. The wealth of Persia followed him west. Only echoes remained of 1,000 kings. And the Conqueror marched on. Behind him, the empire burned. The city of kings was silent. He had burned an empire and moved on. The throne of Persia, now a memory. The throne of Persia smoldered in silence. His banner flew where kings once knelt. The Persian Empire was shaken to its core. The fire's echo lingered in the night. But for Alexander, conquest marched ever forward. Before him lay the world, waiting to be claimed. Persepolis had fallen. An empire turned to ash. Alexander marched into the east to claim what remained. Through the Zagros, the army climbed into the unknown.
This was no golden land, but a furnace of dust and stone.
In the east, rebellion rose to meet him.
Alexander encircled the rebels like a tightening fist. His army struck like iron against stone. The gates of Aria fell to fire. Rebellion was crushed without mercy. On conquered soil, he raised new cities. And still, the East called his name. Alexander turned east to hunt the usurper Bessus. They crossed great rivers to close the noose. Bessus fled into the wild lands of Sogdia. Sogdian clans rose to defend their mountains. In the passes, Alexander met the fury of the mountains.
But the king struck back like a storm.
The usurper was betrayed and brought in chains. Bessus paid the price of kingslaying. Here, at the edge of the world, he built a new Alexandria.
he had reached the end of Persia's world.
But new enemies awaited beyond the border.
At the Jaxartes, the steppe riders met their match. Then Alexander charged like thunder. The riders broke and fled before him. The steppes had bent to the Macedonian king.
But the mountains would not yield so easily.
He raged against shadows he could not strike.
He took Roxana, princess of Bactria, as his bride. Above him, the rebels held the Sogdian rock.
He sent climbers where no army could march. At dawn, the rebels bowed to Alexander. But he was no longer just a Macedonian king. Old loyalties cracked in the night.
In rage, he killed the friend who once saved his life.
Even the greatest conqueror could not escape himself.
At the world's edge, his legend burned brighter than any flame.
Before him flowed the River of Kings.
Across the river, the Elephant King waited. The river stood silent, its waters a mirror of the coming storm. Porus, the Elephant King, brought his might to bear. Under the cloak of darkness, Alexander's army crossed unseen.
The clash of steel!
At dawn, the Macedonian army was ready for battle.
Porus unleashed the power of his elephants.
The battlefield was filled with the sound of trumpets and war cries.
The clash of warriors echoed through the battlefield. The companions, fearless as always, struck the Indian lines. Porus unleashed the power of his elephants.
Spears rose to meet giants, unwavering in their resolve.
The ground trembled as the elephants broke through the phalanx.
The cavalry, with crushing speed, struck the Indian flank. The Indian line cracked and crumbled under the weight of Macedonian might.
Porus, standing tall as ever, refused to yield. Two kings, face to face, the world held its breath.
And in the shadows of defeat, Porus bowed to the conqueror. And as the sun set, Alexander's victory was sealed in blood and fire.
The banner of Macedon claimed the land of the Indus.
Victory weighed heavy in silence. The conqueror's eyes turned east.
The boy who set out to conquer the world returned a legend.
He stood above the world he had taken, and yet it was not enough. Among friends, in triumph, a silence lingered that none could name. The lion's roar fell silent, not to an enemy's blade, but to time itself.
And in that breathless silence, power trembled without its master. The world held its breath as the greatest of its kings exhaled his last.
Empires can be conquered. Legends remain.
His footsteps faded, but the echo of his name marched on through time.
They called him accursed. They called him great. But above all, they remembered him.
And so the fire of a single man lit the world for centuries to come.